All right there, everyone. A no-confidence vote looms against French President Macron in the midst of growing protests throughout the nation. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. If this is your first time here, a very warm welcome to you. I post 2 videos a day analyzing current events in light of awesome conservative trends. So let me encourage you to smack that bell and subscribe button. We are on our way to 100,000 subscribers, and it'll be an absolute privilege to have you as one of them. All right, I think it was the UK paper The Express that said it best. French President Emmanuel Macron's leadership is literally hanging by a thread. Now, believe it or not, it's actually left-wing groups within the French Parliament who are openly discussing launching a no-confidence vote against the French president. The reasons for this are rather simple. Right now, as we speak, Macron is, shall we say, bleeding in the water. His approval ratings have been steadily plummeting over the course of the last few months, even before the uprising of the so-called Yellow Jacket protests a few weeks back. Macron was already experiencing subpar approval ratings. We did a video a couple of months back where we compared Macron's approval ratings to that of President Trump. Trump had about twice the approval of Macron, and that was a couple of months back. Now the latest poll suggests that Macron really is collapsing. 76% of French voters now are dissatisfied with Macron's actions as president, and half of them responded that they were totally disappointed. They totally disapproved of his actions. Barely 20% of the French public actually has confidence in him, and the numbers become even more dismal for a supposed centrist political party, the LREM or the En Marche party. Their support has fallen to barely 19% of the voting public. Now, by contrast, Marine Le Pen's right-wing party National Front, National Rally, formerly known as National Front, they surpassed Macron's party by a few percentage points. They're now polling well over 20% support. So keep in mind, this is among 12 or 13 different political parties. So getting to the 20% support mark is very impressive. So Macron is bleeding in the water, he's hemorrhaging, and now the political sharks are beginning to surround him. And it's the leftist parties that are particularly beginning to smell blood and want to take some bites out of him. So the reports are coming out here that the French Communist Party and the Socialist Party are leading a rebellion to oust Macron from the presidency as soon as possible. Now, as if things couldn't possibly get worse for Macron, all of this is going on as new Paris demonstrations have been planned for Saturday, and the French government has come out and said that they fear what they call major violence to erupt in Paris this weekend, with no sign that the protest movement is easing. Now, in the midst of all this, the nationalist populist leader Marine Le Pen has called for dissolving the lower chamber of the French parliament and holding fresh parliamentary elections. There is precedent for that, by the way. That did happen. I believe it was back in the 1990s during an economic crisis. The lower chamber was dissolved. There were fresh elections held to create a new government. Marine Le Pen, of course, sees an opportunity for some major advances for her National Rally party in the French parliament, given that they're polling so well right now. I believe the #1 party in France. But even more than that, she's looking ahead to the European parliamentary vote in May. Again, like we talked about in our last video, the key in all of this, in terms of the fallout of the Yellow Jacket uprising and the collapse of Macron, the key in all of this is the upcoming European Parliament elections in May, which promises to change the course of the EU possibly for decades to come. Le Pen's National Rally is already poised to dominate the elections. We have to remember that while European nationalist populist parties have been gradually conquering domestic governments, we'll be talking about this in a bit, like what we've seen in Italy, Hungary, Poland, Austria, Czech Republic, Slovenia, Bulgaria, and the like, another area of major success has been in European Parliament elections. Remember, this is where UKIP and Nigel Farage shined. It was not so much in domestic politics, but rather EU politics. This is where they got their press and the bulk of their accomplishments in holding the EU at bay, away from interfering with domestic politics of the nation. The same has been true of Le Pen's party. They've always done better in European elections. So, for example, in 2014, National Front was the clear winner with over 25% of the vote, way ahead of the center-right and socialist parties. So now the National Rally, right, formerly the National Front, is ready to win even more influence in the European Parliament. And keep in mind, their main adversary, which is Macron's party En Marche, LREM, they've never run in a European parliamentary election before. They're a brand new party that is currently polling behind National Rally. So clearly National Rally is poised for a major victory in the European Parliament this May. And as analysts have observed over the past few weeks, the fact that Macron is the only remaining major globalist figurehead in Europe, with Merkel basically on her way out, right? That means that the chaos in France and the continuous political demise is emboldening the nationalist right all over Europe. And we've talked about this as well. It's not just national right in France that's beginning to surge here. There's polling coming out of Hungary that shows that Prime Minister Viktor Orban's Fidesz party, along with their Christian Democratic People's Party allies, they've increased their lead to an astonishing 63% approval. And just to put this in perspective, the second most popular party in Hungary is what many would call the far right or radical right, Jobbik party. They're polling at around 11 or 12%. And so what this means is that the nationalist right represented by Fidesz, the Fidesz coalition, the Jobbik party, comprises 75% support among the Hungarian population. I mean, it's an absolutely stunning level of dominance that the nationalist right has in Hungary. Then you have Matteo Salvini's Italian League. Not only is Salvini himself enjoying approval ratings of around 60%, but his party, the League, got 17% of the national vote back in March in their national elections when they joined forces with Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia. But since then, since they've formed a new governing coalition with the populist Five Star, the League has just surged in support among the Italian population, literally doubling their support to well over 30%. Again, to put this in context, the populist Five Star is polling at around 27%. So this means that the nationalist populists are polling a combined 60% support in Italy. And that's not even counting the center-right Forza Italia and the nationalist Brothers of Italy. If we include these parties, that brings the total swelling to well over 70%, comparable to what we're seeing in Hungary. In Sweden, the nationalist populist Sweden Democrats had their best showing ever, increasing their percentage of the vote substantially from 4 years ago. In Norway, the nationalist populists are back in government in a coalition with the center-right. In Austria, the center-right People's Party and the nationalist right Freedom Party form a dominant 60% coalition. In Germany, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, stormed into the German parliament with just over 13% of the vote for their first national election ever. And since then, they are now officially represented in all of Germany's 16 states. In Poland, the Law and Justice Party has dominated the two most recent elections. In the Czech Republic, nationalist populists now occupy both the office of prime minister and president. In Switzerland, the Swiss People's Party continues to be the dominant political party for over a decade now. And of course, a sweeping nationalist populism was behind the successful Brexit vote, which was shortly followed by the realignment of the Republican Party here in the States around the America First agenda of President Donald Trump. The nationalist populists have won in Slovenia, Slovakia, Moldova, Bulgaria, Western Ukraine, Georgia, Latvia, Estonia, and most recently in the amazing triumph of Spain's Vox Party, who stormed into the Spanish parliament in this past weekend's elections, getting over 11% of the vote. In stunning contrast to all this, Macron's fading popularity is just a symbol of the slow but inevitable death of center-left parties throughout the whole of Western Europe. We've talked about this on other videos, but it bears repeating. Right now, as we speak, the center-left is governing only two nations, Spain and Portugal. Only two. Everywhere we look, one exception being Britain, where Labour seems to be getting a bit of a reprieve from this larger pattern. but pretty much everywhere else we look, the center left is collapsing. The nationalist populists are beginning to smell blood. With protesters in the French uprising growing and Macron's approval imploding, leaders in the nationalist right sense that this is their time. The time we've all been waiting for on this channel. The nationalist right is poised to take over Europe for generations to come. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our new online merchandise selection where you can get gear and apparel celebrating all things nationalist and populist and get a special Christmas discount of 15% off all items by just entering in the promotion code I'll provide for you below. If you would too, please click on our Patreon or PayPal link. Become a supporter of this channel. As you know, we are periodically demonetized by YouTube, and we could really use your help so we can continue to analyze current events in light of awesome conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish.